Some people chase fame, some chase money. Dan Rivera chased something far more dangerous. While the world slept peacefully, he walked into places where fear never sleeps. Abandoned houses, cursed objects, rooms where the air feels heavy even when no one is there. Dan Rivera didn't believe he was fearless. He believed fear was a warning. And tonight, you're about to hear the story of a man who spent his life protecting others from things he never fully escaped himself. This is not just a paranormal story. This is the story of a man who stood between the living and something that never wanted to be found. Dan Rivera was not a ghost hunter for thrill. He wasn't chasing clicks, and he never treated the paranormal like entertainment. To him, the unseen world was real, dangerously real. And the worst part, it was always watching back. Long before cameras, tours, and haunted objects, Dan Rivera was just a quiet kid. He grew up noticing things other people didn't. A room would feel different when someone entered. The temperature would drop for no reason. Silence would feel loud. His family thought he was imaginative. Dan never argued. Because how do you explain that sometimes the dark doesn't feel empty? He later said something that stayed with everyone who knew him. Fear isn't always loud. Sometimes it just stands there, waiting for you to notice. Even as a child, Dan understood something most adults ignore. Not everything unseen is imaginary. Dan eventually joined the U.S. Army, not to escape fear, but to understand it. The military taught him discipline, focus, control under pressure. But even in uniform, he felt the same strange awareness. Some nights, while others slept, Dan would sit awake, feeling watched in rooms that were empty. Combat teaches you one thing very quickly. You learn the difference between fear and instinct. Dan trusted his instinct, and it never left him. After the military, Dan found his calling. He joined the New England Society for Psychic Research, the organization founded by Ed and Lorraine Warren. This wasn't TV drama. This was real investigation, real people, real fear, real consequences. Dan trained under experienced researchers, learning how to approach haunted locations with respect. No provoking, no taunting, no challenges. He believed one rule above all else. If you don't respect the unknown, it will teach you respect in ways you won't survive. Dan specialized in something most investigators avoided: haunted objects. Not houses, not cemeteries, objects. Things people touched, loved, feared. He believed objects could absorb emotion, pain, anger, grief, and sometimes something else. He warned people constantly. Objects don't move on, people do. The object that defined Dan Rivera's legacy was a simple Raggedy Ann doll, Annabelle. Soft fabric, painted smile. But Dan never smiled when he spoke about her. He didn't sensationalize her, he didn't joke. During tours, he would say, "This isn't a toy, and it isn't a story." People laughed, took photos, ignored warnings. Dan watched quietly, because he had seen what happened when boundaries were crossed. During one investigation, Dan experienced something he never fully explained. The EMF meter spiked violently. The temperature dropped nearly 10 degrees. Then he heard it. A voice. Not loud, not threatening, just familiar, calling his name. No one else heard it. Dan ended the investigation immediately. Later, he told his team, "When something knows your name, you stop asking questions."
Paranormal work takes a toll, not physically, emotionally. Dan began sleeping less, eating less. Friends noticed he was quieter. When asked if something was wrong, he always replied the same way: "Some doors don't close behind you." He believed exposure mattered, that the more time you spent around certain objects, the more aware they became of you. Dan led the Devils on the Run tour, bringing Annabelle to secured locations. The goal wasn't fear, it was education. But strange things followed. People reported nightmares, phones recording by themselves, sudden illness. Dan logged everything, never once claiming supernatural causes publicly, but privately, he stopped bringing certain items alone. In one of his last recorded talks, Dan said something chilling. The most dangerous entities are the ones that don't announce themselves. He believed silence was intelligence, that some forces observe, learn, and wait. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, a place soaked in history and death. Dan arrived calm, professional. That night, he stayed alone. No disturbances were reported, no alarms, just silence. The next morning, Dan Rivera was found unresponsive in his hotel room. Officials ruled it natural causes, and the world moved on. But the paranormal community didn't. Dan never claimed the paranormal killed him, but those who knew him asked, did something follow him? Did exposure matter more than protection? Did he go too close for too long? No evidence, only silence. Dan Rivera didn't want to be remembered as a legend. He wanted people to be careful, to respect boundaries, to understand that curiosity without respect comes at a cost. Today, when Annabelle's case is locked, some say the room feels lighter. Others say it feels watched. Dan Rivera walked into the dark so others wouldn't have to. He never claimed victory, only responsibility. And if there's one thing he'd want you to remember, it's this: not everything wants to hurt you, but everything wants to be acknowledged. Sleep well tonight, and if the room feels quiet, ask yourself, why?